Welcome to Bentley. I'm really excited to see the turnout tonight. We're really looking forward to this event. I'm Laura McNamee. I'm a research associate with the Center for Integration of Science and Industry. Tonight's event is part of our Innovator's Business Series, which highlights the center's mission of effectively integrating technology and business innovation. We would like to thank our co-sponsors, the Center for Women in Business here at Bentley, and also Women in the Enterprise of Science and Technology, or WEST, for helping to make this event possible. It is my pleasure to introduce President Gloria Cordes Larson. Gloria has been a champion for the fusion of arts and science with business education, advancing women in the workforce, and responsible innovation. It is because of her leadership that events like this are possible. And we are so honored that she was able to join us tonight to introduce this event. She'll be here to introduce it, and then unfortunately she has to leave because she has another engagement, but we're really happy she could spare some of her time to come in and introduce the event. Welcome, Gloria.
Thank you so much, Laura, and thank you for all that you do for our new center. Gosh, it's so great to look out at this audience and see so many great students, faculty members, alums, and great members of the business community, and a special welcome to our guests from West. Welcome, welcome, welcome to Bentley, especially those of you who are first-timers to our campus, and a particularly warm welcome to Dr. Deborah Dunsire and our moderator, Sandra Glucksman. Thank you both so much for coming tonight. So this is my chance to brag for just a few minutes, shamelessly, about the integration of business and arts and sciences at Bentley, and also our Center for Integration of Science and Industry. They perfectly align for everything that our brand is all about, and I couldn't be more grateful for that. I think this is a particularly innovative, future-facing, true 21st century enterprise, and I thought I would just tell you a little bit about how they relate to one another. So why do we have this center with its focus on science and industry at Bentley? Well, I have to tell you, for those of us in higher education, the pressure is on more than ever before these days. You can't pick up the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, or read anything online or through social media that's not critiquing higher ed these days, and there are a couple of reasons for that. One reason is that employers everywhere are saying that colleges and universities are graduating far too many graduates who aren't qualified to take even entry-level professional positions. Then we have families who, of course, rightfully are questioning the high price point for higher education today when you can't demonstrate a real return on investment. And then, of course, all you have to do is look at the statistics. In the wake of the recent economic meltdown, what do we see? Almost 8% unemployment for college graduates, and far, far greater numbers who are underemployed, just recently minted college graduates. And then, of course, in addition to that, we're sending our kids into this highly unpredictable new normal, a far less predictable, fast-changing, highly complex environment in which I think the single most important thing we can do for new graduates is make sure that they learn to be adaptable in this fast-changing world. It's that kind of adaptability in a new type of marketplace, a global marketplace, that makes college education, if it's done right, particularly relevant. So that means that we have, particularly as a standalone business university, a really strong imperative to be relevant in today's 21st century, which is more challenging than ever. Let me be clear. We want our students to graduate as thoughtful, creative, lifelong learners. That's been the hallmark of higher education, getting a college degree for many, many decades, if not centuries now. And Bentley does that. But at the same time, we want to make sure that Bentley graduates have market-driven skills that they need to land professional positions, to develop career-long capabilities, and then to ultimately have the ability to impact companies and the communities that they operate in meaningful, productive ways. That's why we care so much about what we think is a highly unusual, very distinctive education model here. It's one you've already heard that we call fusion at Bentley, but let me explain just real briefly what that means. We think that a business education that is genuinely integrated with the arts and sciences, that that really demonstrates a high level of fusion is one that's going to prepare our graduates for any type of organization, any sector of the economy, any place in the world that they might go to. So in addition to the traditional careers that you think about when you think about Bentley, accounting, finance, marketing, and management, fusion at Bentley, I think, is particularly relevant for what we're talking about tonight. We're really relevant when it comes to new economy jobs, life sciences, energy and sustainability, communications, analytics, public policy. All of these require this somewhat unique mix of business skill sets and discipline-specific knowledge, but it has to be merged with critical thinking, creativity, and really strong communications and collaboration skills. Fast forward to our Center for the Integration of Science and Industry. It perfectly illustrates this fusion, combining business education and research with the latest innovations in science to help address some of the thorniest issues that our society and industry face today. Much of what the center does serves as a complement to the classroom. We think that hands-on learning and getting outside of simply the classroom environment is incredibly important. So it's events like this one tonight, but it's also like another event that I want to do a shout out for, which we held in tandem with our top-notch career services team. We called it Fusing Science and Business, Building That Next Generation of Healthcare and Biotech Talent at Bentley. The symposium brought leaders from the life science sector to campus to share their expertise with our students, which is what we think education should be all about. The session started with an amazing keynote from the head of talent acquisition and university relations for Biogen IDIC, who detailed the company's hiring practices. She was then joined by a Bentley alum who spent 13 years at Biogen, along with a Bentley MBA candidate who spent last summer in their marketing department, who could talk about their career paths and what Biogen has done for them. Later in the program, Dr. Fred Ledley and Dr. Helen Meldrum, both key players in our center, took the stage to moderate what proved to be a star-studded panel of business leaders from healthcare, pharma, and biotech arenas, all of them talking about industry hiring practices and why they value this type of fusion between business skill sets, the ability to read a balance sheet, and also to know a lot about the life sciences. Representatives from all sorts of leading companies were here representing healthcare, pharma, and biotech. And here's the point. This is what our kids got from this: firsthand personal career paths, invaluable industry insights, and also the chance to ask really, really good questions. Dr. Dunsire, you can expect some really, really good questions tonight. Bentley students do that particularly well, but all designed to help them understand how you take your passion and see it evolve into a real career advantage for you. The event ended with that single most important activity, which I encourage you to do tonight too, and that's to network. I know Dr. Dunsire will be here so that you can meet her afterwards. Another important center activity is building outside partnerships, which is what our relationship with West is all about. Many of you know, because you represent West so well, groundbreaking organization dedicated to advancing women in the fields of science and technology, arming them with inspiration, knowledge, and connections to reach their full potential. These are all things I promise you our keynote speaker knows all about tonight, but all things that are sorely needed in today's economy. I don't know if you guys caught the Sunday Boston Globe magazine that was all about the 100 top women-led companies in Massachusetts. There was a sidebar story about help. We still need more women when it comes to STEM careers. The fact that women are still such a distinct minority in the science, technology, and math arenas, something we're endeavoring to fix here at Bentley. I know West is too. And a big thanks also goes to our other co-host, Bentley Center for Women in Business, for also introducing us to West, in addition to being a co-host. So I want to end with what I hope is a few comments about tonight's program and how it relates to a recent, really very focused endeavor here on campus that also relates to our overarching brand, as well as to say some things about our speaker. Bentley has had a recurring theme all fall that really is a long-standing theme for us, and that's What is responsible innovation all about? I happen to be looking directly at Lynn Marcus, who's one of our leading information technology and communications scholars, both here and on the world stage. She helped bring this responsible innovation seminar to Bentley just several weeks ago, and I have to say Lynn is doing a brilliant job leading Bentley's rebuilt, reconfigured, and just breaking all records at breakneck speed new research council at Bentley. So Lynn Marcus, thank you for joining us tonight. You are doing amazing things at Bentley. So 3 weeks ago, as I noted, we hosted this major research colloquium on the topic, and it focused on socially responsible innovation in areas like environmental sustainability, financial accountability, and information and communication technology ethics. All things that, again, you can read about serially, mostly for bad practices in the press. Our longstanding attention to responsible innovation makes it a particular pleasure to have somebody as accomplished as Dr. Deborah Dunsire with us this evening. Her career is exemplary in all respects. Her work in the biopharmaceutical industry, developing drugs to treat cancer and other life-threatening diseases, it's a pitch-perfect illustration of what responsible innovation should be all about and the rationale behind our Center for the Integration of Business and Industry, Science and Industry. Deborah is a highly experienced leader when it comes to science, clinical operations, operational matters, and commercial experience in the biopharma industry. She served as president and CEO of Millennium Pharmaceuticals, led the Novartis U.S. Oncology business, and is currently president and CEO of her latest endeavor, Envivo Pharmaceuticals. She is the recipient of way too many awards for me to mention tonight, most of which prove that she started this career as a very small child. Most recently, you've been honored with the 2009 Healthcare Businesswomen's Association Woman of the Year, the 2011 MassBIO Innovator Award, and the 2013 Boston CEO Conference Lifetime Achievement Award. You are way too young to have a Lifetime Achievement Award, but your areas of distinction speak for you. So thank you so much for joining us tonight and ensuring that this whole notion of responsible innovation carries through this night's discussion as well beyond. And thank you, Sandra. Thank you so much for serving as moderator. You are no stranger to Bentley. You have participated in many events with our Center for Women in Business, and it's just a delight to have you back. So let me end with bragging just for a nanosecond. That's a good scientific term, isn't it, Fred? Just a nanosecond about our Center for Integration of Science and Industry, funded through a very generous multi-year grant of $1.3 million from the National Biomedical Research Foundation. I am always, always glad to have the chance to personally thank and perhaps slightly embarrass Dr. Fred Ledley for his leadership role not only in bringing this endeavor to Bentley, but your continuing leadership role in already making it such a resounding success. A round of applause for my friend, Dr. Fred Ledley. And I think this is important for our students and how this all ties back to how closely this is aligned with our whole emphasis on this fusion of business and arts and sciences. In addition to many other programs and activities, the foundation has been providing funding to Bentley's Valente Center that serves as a central role when it comes to the fusion of arts and sciences in the business disciplines that I've been talking about. This particular funding stream is all about helping to strengthen undergraduate research at Bentley, something we're strongly committed to and that we're already seeing benefits from. So I couldn't be more grateful on behalf of the whole Bentley community when it comes to the foundation's support in all respects, or more excited about the really central role that this notion of science and industry is now playing here at Bentley and because of this center more broadly in society. And of course, we're all just over the moon that you're here tonight, Dr. Deborah Dunsire. We're so happy to have you here, and I know you guys are all in for an absolutely amazing treat. So thank you all for coming, and on with the show. Thank you.
So just to explain the format for tonight's evening, it's going to be a conversation between our moderators, Sandra Glucksman and Deborah Dunsire. And we are really honored tonight to have really two industry leaders from the biopharmaceutical industry with us. Just a little bit briefly about Sandra. You know, she could be a featured speaker tonight as well and has been at Bentley before, but tonight she's agreed to be our moderator. And Sandra is a serial entrepreneur. She was trained as a molecular biologist, and she was one of the first scientists at Millennium Pharmaceuticals. And then she worked her way into upper management roles, eventually VP at Millennium. And she is now currently working on a really new exciting venture with Third Rock, Polaris, and Flagship. So, sounds like a big deal. And then, of course, our featured speaker, which Gloria just introduced so well, I won't belabor the point, and I'll let you two ladies.
It's great to be here. Deborah was my boss for a year, so this looks kind of artificial a little bit. But anyway, thank you, Deborah, from me and from the whole group. So what we want to do is leave some time for question at the end. And what I thought we'd break it up is talk a little bit about your career, then the industry, and then leave it to, what are the challenges specifically for women? So maybe you can tell us a little bit about your transition, what motivated you to be a physician, and then what motivated you to transition from being a physician in South Africa to joining a pharma company way back when you were a kid.
Well, first of all, let me say thank you so much for having me here. It's really great to be here. It's going to be great to meet many of you afterwards. And thanks, Sandra, for agreeing to be the moderator. Of course, she knows way too much about me, so it's kind of nerve-wracking, right? She might ask all kinds of difficult questions. But seriously, I do hope that we've got plenty of time for your questions, because I want this evening to really be about addressing things that are important for you. So I'll encapsulate quickly. I was born in Zimbabwe, grew up in South Africa, went to medical school in Johannesburg, and worked as a general practitioner. Joined industry sort of by accident. I was going to be studying ophthalmology. I told my partner I'd be leaving, my general practitioner partner, I'd be leaving in a year to go join the residency circuit for ophthalmology. We better find him another partner. It was going to take a long time. It took about a month, and I was out of a job. So, I had time to kill until my residency position became available. So I was looking through the Sunday paper, found an advert for a clinical researcher. And, my husband was still a student. He was riding a motorcycle. This job came with a car. I said, gee, I could probably learn something about clinical research, and it would help me if I'm an ophthalmologist. I might do a clinical trial one day. How bad can it be for 9 months? I may as well go try out. And I did, and I got the position at Sandoz doing clinical research in a small company or country. You do a lot of things, so I'm not claiming expertise, but CNS, dermatology, transplantation, immunology, endocrinology were the fields that I had to cover. And initially it was challenging. I never intended to be in industry. I'm a physician who loves to, even today, patients, and I'm motivated by changing health. But what I discovered is that in industry we have that opportunity for many more people than you ever would as a single physician treating your own patients. And I became very excited by the access to the science, access to thought leaders in so many different fields as we brought new therapies forward, and being that partner and collaborator with academia, with lab scientists, all the way through to the commercial staff, bringing it to physicians. And it was an industry around the world. I was collaborating with people in Switzerland, in the US, and it was so exciting that it was something I decided to stay doing as long as I enjoyed it. So here we are today, and Gloria was very kind, but it's a lot of years. And the transitions were driven by finding out about an industry that I didn't know about. I'm convinced that many graduates graduating with an undergraduate degree, high school leavers, don't really know what's out there and what career paths there really are. And I certainly didn't know about this one, and I think it opened up. And seeing it, I could start to see possibilities, and so stayed.
You know, I've seen you at management team meetings, and one question that I was very impressed by your running a business, but having the context of the science, right? We have the pressures, especially when you ran a public company, the pressures to continue to grow the business, but always think about the science. How have you been able to merge those things? Because this is something that is the theme for today.
Mm-hmm. I think you learn by doing, and you learn by having great people around you, and so I've always been surrounded by great scientists who, you know, were able to educate me on the possibilities of the science. Being a physician, I think, helped in terms of saying, what could that really be? What could that do in terms of transforming health, which is what my sort of life mission is, if you like. But then, maybe it's because I have Scottish parents. You know, I've always been pretty focused on, you know, you live within your means. And it's maybe a very simplistic philosophy, but if you're a business, you will always have to make choices because you can't do everything. And it's a question of figuring out what's the constellation of choices that will be best utilizing the resources available to us. And it's a thought of not only today, but how do you deliver into the future? So the early science, as you know, we invest in things in our healthcare industry that are going to deliver a decade away from today. But you can't only look at today, otherwise there won't necessarily be a tomorrow. And I think it's the ability to say, okay, yes, we've got to get I think about it in terms of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Excuse me. You know, it's sort of the shelter and food level of today, right? If you don't deliver your commercial forecasts or whatever, if you're in a commercial business, then you won't be able to do anything else. But while you do that, you really do have to take care of those higher level needs of preparing for the future.
You know, especially in the context of entrepreneurship, how have you viewed risks and some of the changes that you've made over time, and how have you dealt with what you may have seen at that time as something risky for your own career, and now in retrospect you may say, no, it wasn't that risky, but can you put yourself back and when you had to make those decisions, especially for a young audience? And yesterday I learned that on average, not our generation, but the 20-year-olds will have 11.3 different jobs over their lifespan. So with each will come a decision, a risk, etc. Right?
Yeah, and if I look back at my career, there's probably been at least that, but some of them are within one company.
Right.
So I don't know whether that's research saying they'll change companies 11.3.
No, but I think, you know, your openness to go from science to business, how did you make those decisions, and they look risky at the time, and how do you to break apart what looks like a sort of risky concept to say this is right for me? Okay,
so I'm going to pick 3 different ones because I think they illustrate different things. So one of the first ones was I joined industry with Sandoz, it was then, before it became Novartis, as a clinician, so doing clinical trials. And I had to learn that, and we all know that was motivated by, gee, I can get my husband off his motorbike. But when I then was asked by the general manager in South Africa to take on a role that looked over the specialty products from both a commercial perspective, so a specialty commercial sales force, particularly in organ transplant, and then the new product development, if you like, so more of a commercial oriented role. I was initially very, very reticent to do that because I felt very much outside my comfort zone. And I said to him, I'm a physician, I'm a doctor, what do you want with me running a sales force? And he said, you know, we don't have people who really understand these high science projects, and I think you do well. And so I am a person who's always wanted to do things well, and I'm very nervous about not doing it well. So what I did with him is I said, okay, why don't I do the work, but you keep the title? So you're sort of you're nominally the head, and I'll fill in for you. And he said, oh yeah, whatever. And so I think there are two things illustrated here. One is you do have to step out of your comfort zone. It's very scary. The second is if there's somebody who knows you and who you know and trust who's suggesting that to you, it might be worth a look, right? You have to take that pretty seriously. And then sometimes you need to look for cover, which I did, and he obligingly sort of bore with me. And you know, he's still a person that I'm in touch with today because he was a person who developed people really well. So I took that step. I worked with people who had been my peers, and I became their supervisor, and they were also delightful in that they reached out to me and said, look, we want you to succeed. In other words, we're going to let you manage us, which they did. And I learned working with them. And I think that another thing you can learn when you're stepping out of your comfort zone is don't pretend you know more than you know. The people you're with, most people, are willing to help you. There are a few oddities in life who are just nasty, and you know, you have to just set those aside, but most people are really willing to help you. So I did learn a lot from that transition. The next one, I'll touch on this briefly, but I think it's important, was being asked to move to Switzerland from South Africa. And that's a big move, and obviously it involved my husband. We didn't have children, so it made it a little bit easier. But the opportunity to work internationally, as I look at people who are in the beginning of their career, if you can work in a different environment, sometimes you can get that difference by working in a different industry, but working in a different country really is an incredible growth experience. And if you're in a situation, and particularly early in your career, where you don't necessarily have as many family considerations, if you can do that, it's a massive growing and developing experience. So I'd really say that. And I guess the third one I'd touch on is making the decision to move from Novartis to Millennium. At Novartis, I was in more of a commercial role, running the North American oncology business, phenomenal opportunities and phenomenal products. And I wanted to grow by increasing the number of different functions that I touched, because I loved the research side and the development side. But at Novartis, I was being moved more into a commercial track. So I kept turning down promotions. And then Millennium came along, and it was perfect. It was all the way research through commercialization, and yet I was hesitant. And what it came down to was I was hesitant because I was afraid of failing. And if you're a public company CEO, your failure is fairly public. And I guess that what ultimately got me over the edge was something that, you know, when I looked at at my life as a physician, and I'd worked in emergency room quite a lot when I'd been practicing. You know, in a bad day in an emergency room, if you don't get something right, somebody actually does die. Not always, but can. And that's real, and it's very finite. In business, you know, bad things can happen, but nobody dies, really. And eventually I contextualized it in that way, and I said, you know, what's the worst thing that can happen? Okay, I'm embarrassed. It's like, okay, so that never killed anybody. And here is an opportunity that looks like everything I have wanted. Why would I hold back from that because I'm afraid of failing? Because really, if I fail, nobody dies. So I think that's another sort of way of thinking about risk, is really contextualize how bad can it be if it doesn't work? Is it really irrevocable? Very few things are in a business life. Mistakes of integrity are irrevocable, don't make them. But other things, if they don't work out, you can change, you can go back, you can adapt. So it's worth it to step out of your comfort zone.
And when you think of your career from, you know, back in South Africa to in Switzerland, I imagine sort of the cultural, you know, it was probably, the culture within the company was probably not that different. And then coming to North America and then moving to Millennium, which is very, very different than Novartis. What were your biggest challenges that you saw? How did you resolve them over time? What's the role of mentors or friends, or how did you create sort of support? Was it your husband? Were there mentors throughout your career? You know, how did you build sort of the self-assurance to do certain things?
Wow, that's a big question.
You can manage it.
How long do you have?
I mean, people ask the role of mentors, but I think in my mind, I think in your case, our husbands also play a role, right? We shouldn't.
No, certainly. You know, I think having the support of your significant other is critically important in your ability to go for it, right? They may not be the person who can advise you on how to succeed. Probably they do have good advice on that too. But they can certainly give you the backing to go for it. If you're constantly looking, you know, backwards to, you know, particularly in international moves with families, if the family's not happy, the worker's not likely to be able to be particularly successful. So if you have that support, I think it's a critical thing. Within as you're beginning your career, I think your boss is an incredible potential source of mentoring. And one of the things that I really do say to people is look, wherever you can, look at your boss and make sure you're working for a good boss. And how do you measure that? You measure that by, do people who work for them get developed and grow? And, you know, how does that happen? So it's not only are they a nice person, but do they actively develop the people that work for them? And if you're in a situation where you're working for a boss who doesn't do that, who hogs all the benefit and the glory, then you need to look for another boss. But I have been very fortunate to work for great people who not only challenged me but also encouraged me to develop, and with whom I had very frank conversations about what I'd like to do, and they had great suggestions. You know, when you're new in an industry, you don't know very much about what are the possibilities, and so your boss is a person who can open up possibilities and open up your mind to what's out there and how you might be able to grow and build. The other thing that I learned to do, and it's a little bit terrifying at first, is go to people in the organization who are a little ahead of you, not necessarily at the top of the organization, but who are doing a job you find interesting, and say, hey, would you mind taking half an hour? Could I come talk to you about your career path? How did you come to be in the position you're in? What experiences did you gain? How did you gain those things? And I find that it's a very informal, it's not a mentor, which sort of implies a long-term bonded relationship, but it is a mentor in that even if it's just 30 minutes once, where that person talking about their own career can help you understand, okay, well maybe I need this type of experience next if I ever want to go in that direction, and that was very helpful. And then, that goes on all the way up to, when you're a CEO, that is a more lonely job in many ways. But what I found when I came particularly to Boston, it's an incredibly collegial community, and I reached out to CEOs I'd never met before and said, hey, can we get together? I'm new in town, and I'd love to hear about your company and what you're facing. And again, people the vast majority of people are willing to help you, and they did. And so that's been a source. So I met a lot of people, and I've always then had a library of people who had different experiences than me that I could call up if I was facing a situation and say, gee, hey, have you I think you faced something like this. How have you dealt with it?
Good. When you think over your career, what are some of the things that you're most proud of and why?
I think when I think about what I love to work on, it's that transforming health. And the ability I've had to work with amazing transformative products all the way through my career. When I started at Sandoz, I worked on cyclosporin, which was the first of the organ transplant drugs that really transformed the ability for people to keep their organs. I worked on clozapine, which was used in schizophrenia as one of the most effective, even today, antipsychotics. I had the opportunity to work in the oncology field in bringing forward Gleevec to market, which transformed chronic myelogenous leukemia from a disease that killed people in 3 years to a disease where people are living 15 more years. We don't know how long they'll live. And then Velcade at Millennium, transforming multiple myeloma, and now at Invivo, thinking about transforming cognition in Alzheimer's disease and schizophrenia, along with the pipeline behind it. I just feel so privileged to have been part of the global teams that have brought those transforming therapies forward.
Great. You're a new CEO at Envivo, and it's a different disease. What's exciting about your job now? It's a very different, it's a private company, right?
Yeah.
What's the new learning and the new challenges ahead for you?
Okay, now really how long do you have?
And it's a tough disease area.
It's been phenomenal to, again, step right outside my comfort zone. I'd worked in oncology probably for almost 20 years, dare I say. And that's a place you're always learning as well. But then to step away to a different disease area and surely, what one learned about schizophrenia in medical school and dealt with it a little bit all those years ago at Sandoz. And then Alzheimer's, unfortunately, I know about personally because my husband's father is afflicted. But when you think about the science and what's been happening in the science, so much has transformed. So the learning curve is so steep, and one feels incompetent. From going into meetings where I'd feel very competent, at least to be able to understand what the scientists are talking about, to be once again at a level of incompetence is really uncomfortable.
And how do you deal with that uncomfort, especially since you're the boss?
You ask a lot of questions. And as you probably remember, that has been a permanent affliction of mine, but I haven't stopped. So again, even in trying to understand the company before I joined, I connected with key opinion leaders and would call them up, usually with an introduction from somebody who knew them, not straight out of the blue, but people would spend an hour with me just to help me learn, which has been exciting.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, you've worked in different type of companies, companies that are more research focused, bigger companies, commercial companies. Is there, different types of leadership or management styles that you've had to adapt? Sort of what are some of the common features that are important for you, and are there differences that you have had to take on because of the culture of the company or the size, or
I think
or just maturity, right? Change,
right.
We change, we evolve.
We do, and I think that different companies have different personalities and cultures, and I think when you go into a company, it is something that you have to look at and adapt to. What does this company expect? And if it doesn't fit with you, then you won't be happy there long term, and you should find a company where the culture does suit you better. And Novartis is an incredibly analytical, performance-oriented culture, and you have to be comfortable stepping into that. Millennium is also performance-oriented, but in a very different way. And we see the same. So the theme of performance orientation is there throughout, but at Envivo it manifests in a different way than it did at Millennium and at Novartis. And so if you're a performance-oriented person, you can fit in all of those three places, many more besides, but you need to be cognizant that you might have to adapt your style to that different personality.
So it's not so much the what, it's the how.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So just a few more questions, and then we'll open it for the audience. As a woman, have you seen specific challenges that you think women have faced? Are the challenges the same when you started your career versus now? How do you see that difference, and what recommendation do you make for women and young men in the audience?
I think it's great to say that I do think that the challenges are in some ways diminishing, certain of the challenges, right? But there are two places probably where the challenge for women come from. And one is that the majority of senior leadership in pretty well all industries across the whole planet are men, right? So there's an ability for any group to understand members of their own group more easily than they can understand members of another group. And this applies to all aspects of diversity. It's not simply women and men, it's racial differences, ethnic differences, language differences, whichever group you would like to consider. So I think it's simpler to assess ability and potential for people who look a little bit more like you. And that's true for women to an extent too, although women have more exposure to what potential looks like in men because there are more of them to look at, right? More role models and things like that. So I think that's a challenge, and it's interesting. I happened to be talking to a person who heads up diversity and inclusion for Biogen IDEC, and when you look at populations of leaders, one of the things that we're all less conscious of than we need to be is that unconscious bias. And that applies to all people. I'm not leveling that criticism at men, but it does occur in leaders of organization. You don't realize sometimes what assumptions you're actually making until they're pointed out to you. So I think that challenge still exists for women, but is diminishing. And what will transform it are more women at senior levels in organizations, and that's happening, not as fast as we need it to, but it is. So, that's certainly a challenge. The other challenge that I do think women face is that, and that's one that's less tractable, but it is changing, that women are still carrying the majority of the family work along with their job. And I'm really happy to see it is changing, and certainly in the younger folks working, and my heritage with Envivo is a little bit shorter, so I don't have as much data, but at Millennium, seeing men who were taking their children to the doctor during the day or having to stay home because their child was sick and couldn't go to school, it's not only the women who are doing that anymore, but the majority of that is still falling to women. And that's a social sort of challenge that women still face. And it is a harder, it's not as easy to think about, okay, how do you really change that?
Okay, thank you. I think we're gonna, Laura, we're gonna open up for the audience in the last 15 minutes. Do we need, you want my microphone?
There's a handheld.
Oh, so if people could stand up and maybe Laura can bring the microphone or you can shout it out. So if any questions from? Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Connor Weiner. This has been very positive and uplifting, and you've made all your transitions so well. Maybe looking at it from a slightly negative perspective, I think one of the most difficult things you can do as a leader is go into a new corporation and a new place where there are networks you don't understand. It's just very challenging. Have you seen people fail as new leaders in corporations, and can you give us some hints about avoiding 2 or 3 things that pretty generally, in your experience, get people into trouble when they come in to a new corporation as a leader?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, Connor. And I think one of the biggest challenges and the biggest derailers is believing or behaving as if the new is exactly the same as the old. And that's what I said about, when you go to a new place, things look very, very different, and it's good to step back and say, okay, how do I need to show up here that might be different than I showed up, at a different place? And modulating how you interact is not a failure to remain true to yourself. And I think sometimes people think, if I modulate who I am, well, first of all, you're not modulating who you are, you're modulating some behavior. In order to take the step back and see, okay, how does this place function? It's like, I hate to say it, but the mythical American tourist in Europe, who wants their American food, wants their, if you just speak louder, somebody will understand you, because of course everybody must understand our language. I'm an American now, okay, so I'm not.
So am I.
But that's the kind of thing that I think can cause people to fail, right? Assuming everybody, the rest of the world should be like where you just came from.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That was just tremendous. There's a lot of young women in the audience. I have 3 young daughters who all are about to graduate from college.
Wow,
and you
congratulations.
kind of just touched base about that at the time that you moved, you had no children, but I'm sure there were some decisions that you did have children, I'm not sure. but maybe you could let us know a little bit about that side of your life and who supported you, whether it was your husband, your family, your company, about balancing still being a mom, if you are a mom, and doing this incredible job that you are now. And I think that would help the audience and would help me to help my daughters. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I am a mom. I have two sons who are 17 and 15, and they're a freshman and a junior in high school. And I did make the one transition from, they were born in New Jersey when I was with Novartis, and when we moved to come up to Millennium, they were young. And certainly I will say to you that moving children when they're younger is easier than when they're older. It's also true to say that they are, while they protested about moving from New Jersey, they are much happier, or they feel very thrilled about the opportunities that have become available to them here. And I really do think that moving is a great learning experience for children. Having said that, there comes a time, and we're in it right now as a family, where I don't necessarily feel I'd be as comfortable moving them. And so it does change your choices, right? And so I feel very much Boston-based right now in order to take care of their needs. So there are a universe of possibilities that are theoretically open to me that I would have to shut down right now. So yes, you are going to make different choices at different times of your life to fit with a spouse or the needs of your family. But that's just as important to me, that yes, for a season, you won't be able to pursue a particular career opportunity, but it is for a season, you know, nothing in life lasts forever. You're just going through that, right? You've got people, leaving the nest. I think I have worked throughout. I do think it is tougher for women to come back in to the workplace. There are some companies that make that a little bit easier than others. I think I look at Ernst & Young as a company that has some tremendous focus on keeping access to their pool of female talent. But not all companies have those programs. The other thing that happens is, and I say this a lot to women, you know, if you want to, there is no having it all. Okay, sorry, there isn't. So there are always choices and there are always trade-offs. And that all paths are legitimate as long as you're choosing them for your what you want to achieve in your whole life, right? Not just your work life. We are whole people. So for people who have a fabulous education, a fabulous career, and say, you know, I want to stay home with my kids, that is a wonderful choice. If you're a person who says, you know, I really want to advance in my career and I want to, you know, rise to the level of a CEO, then I would probably say to you, it's not necessarily compatible with taking 6, 7, you know, years off in the middle of your career, because other people are not, and they're gaining experiences that you will not have. So you do have to think about those trade-offs. As I was going through, you know, I had a husband who shared with me, supported me, and we invested in help. We don't have any family who live here, so I didn't have the ability to have, you know, family come by and look after the kids, but so we hired live-in help. And you make a choice financially then that you will invest that to be sure that you feel comfortable with how your family is being managed when you're unable to be there. And then you live with guilt every day. Right? The day my first son was born was the last guilt-free day I had. And you know, you hope. I remember talking to a woman who was a senior commercial leader at Novartis, and saying to her, you know, you've got children graduating college. Do you look back on your career and ever wonder if you did the right thing? And she said, I'm able to look at it and feel confident because my children are all, you know, safely graduated and are upstanding human beings with a job. Only then could she feel comfortable that she'd made the right choice. And to some extent, you know, you are faced with that. Gee, you know, if your particular child happens to make some poor judgments and choices, I guess many women will look at themselves and say, you know, it must be me. If I had stayed home, it wouldn't have happened. Well, the truth is it happens in all kinds of families. So I think you just have to understand that, yeah, you can't have it all. There's going to be trade-offs. You need to invest in what it is that you and your spouse and family define are the things that you want to achieve out of your life, your whole life, and then invest to support how you do that. And I say to women, marry well. And that doesn't mean marry rich people. It means marry. If you are ambitious for a career, you need to have, if you're going to marry, if that is your choice, then you need a partner who is going to walk that path with you and be supportive. Because I do think that, you know, that the tension will arise if there are different expectations within a marriage.
Thank you for coming and sharing your experience with us. As business-oriented students, the urge to take upon these opportunities for the demand for business students to join in the science field, what are your initial recommendations to really focus on and gear ourselves towards that now that we have such an embedded mentality just within the business sector? What are your recommendations to make that shift?
To move into the field of science?
Yes, and make them both work together.
Okay, so if I'm understanding your question, let me just play it back. For people who are embedded in the business sort of training track, how would you transition into a life sciences type of
Correct.
organization? Well, ask a lot of questions, right? So if you're coming in with a business background and you're moving, let's say, into a finance or a strategic planning type of a role, go and find the researchers and ask them to tell you what they're doing and have them take you through it step by step. And most of them love to talk about it, and the first time you hear it, you'll understand about 10% of it. The next time you hear it, you might understand 20% of it. And each time, you'll layer in a little bit more. I'm only talking about myself, that I learn by interacting. There are certainly plenty of courses you can also go to that deal with, you know, introducing you to a particular therapeutic area if your company's an oncology company or a neurosciences company. But just go to the scientists within the company you're in and have them tell you about their work. And don't be afraid when you only understand 10% of it.
So my question is, what is, I mean, having been at Novartis and Millennium and I guess Sandoz, what is an example of science that you thought was innovative and how it got turned into a, business, with the drug?
It's a little bit hard to hear you. Could you hold it closer
Like
to your
that?
mouth and
Is that, can
That's
I hear you
better,
now?
yeah.
Yeah, so in all of your there's at least 3 companies and now a 4th company's coming up, do you have a good example of what you thought was really innovative science that got turned into, a good business, a drug or that exemplifies, because I always think, well, if it's good science, it's going to turn into, say, a drug or something useful possible. I mean, but how can business actually turn it into a good?
Oh, okay. So that's a different lens on the question. So how does the business make the science more successful? Is that what you're asking?
A good example that you can think of where
Yeah,
you've seen
so-
this happen
so let's
over
take-
your career.
Let's take Velcade at Millennium. The science there is phenomenal. So, Julian Adams taking this concept of proteasome inhibition, so wonderful science. Nobody thought it could be, the molecule could be...
Novel chemistry also that people poo-pooed.
Yes,
Right?
so the boronate. So the science was very ably brought through and then pulled through clinical development, Dixie Esseltine and Nancy Simone, and brought to the market. And if there was one thing I'd say when I got to Millennium was that the ethos of the company was so scientific, it felt that the science would automatically be accepted and transform. And the science is hard, but the commercialization, that's easy. It basically does itself. And of course it doesn't. You need sophistication across the entire value chain. And so one of the reasons that I was brought into Millennium was to take the company into that level of, the same level of science sophistication was needed on the commercial side. And through doing that, through bringing in the right people, the right experiences, investing further in the right types of things, we were able to transform the growth trajectory of the drug. And, it's now a multi-$100 million product. But without the appropriate business input behind it and business investment behind it, great science would have floundered and not achieved that potential, if that's what your question was headed towards.
Is there time for one more question?
So we learn a lot about the great decisions that leaders make and then kind of the bad decisions that leaders make and how they kind of respond to those decisions. So you've talked a lot about, great things that you've done. Has there been anything in your career where you've kind of taken a wrong turn or made a decision that you don't think led your company in the right direction? And how did you respond to it after?
Okay, this is going to sound flippant, but I'm going to tell you this example anyway because it's still the one that I know I made a real mistake. Millennium was going through some challenging times. We were downsizing. There was a real focus on how we managed our cash, just many things. And somebody came forward and told me that we spent an inordinate number of tens of thousands of dollars on milk because the refrigerators all stocked with milk. And between me and the other management team, we managed to make the decision to abolish the milk. So we had little creamers, right? Maggie Duffy, stop laughing.
I don't drink milk, so it wasn't my...
Yeah, you didn't care. Anyway, it just was so bad because it left the company feeling that we were going under, right? I mean, really, we've abolished the milk. And you're all laughing, this is serious stuff. It was really a bad decision. We learned it was a bad decision. And so how do you respond? You say, we made a mistake. So the management team basically came out and we took pictures with our milk mustaches with the got milk underneath. And the answer was, yes, we have milk. So we brought the milk back and apologized to the company for having made a stupid decision. And I think that's all you can do. Sometimes you're not going to take things in the wrong direction. The very worst thing you can do is, for fear of losing face, persist on a wrong path. So fess up, you know, we call it man up, woman up, I don't know. Step up to that plate and say, hey, this is not going the way it should, and we need to make a different decision.
So this is going really great so far, and we're going to continue this conversation on the third floor of the Dandies room with some refreshments. But before we sort of depart and go up that way, I want to thank all the people that were able to make this event possible, including Donna Connor, our program assistant at the center, and Jamie Mayo, the director of operations at West, as well as our co-sponsors of the Center on Women in Business. And thank you so much to Deborah Dunsire and Sandra for being here today. It's really great.
Thank you so much.